There's a school in Utah, Westminster College, Salt Lake City, Utah. They are right now offering a course on hardcore pornography. This is a private college, not state-sponsored, but it's a private college offering a course on hardcore porn. This is Gender 3000. So already, you know, the course is in a gender studies department, which means it should be abolished. Because gender studies and all of these sort of critical studies that cropped up in recent decades to give stupid students something that they can study because they weren't able to keep up in the real academic disciplines. So you say, okay, we're going to do gender and ethnicity and migration studies, and it's just an education in leftism. And so as long as you say the right political slogans, you can get a good grade and you can graduate. It was a way to give the left an even stronger foothold in education. So the minute you see gender studies, you think, okay, never mind. This should get rid of this. As long as we're fixing standards here, just abolish this whole department, turn it into a library or something. In any case, the Gender 3 Studies course is called Porn. And here's the description. Hardcore pornography is as American as apple pie and more popular than Sunday Night Football. Our approach to this billion-dollar industry is as both a cultural phenomenon that reflects and reinforces sexual inequalities, but holds the potential to challenge sexual and gender norms, and as an art form that requires serious contemplation. We will watch pornographic films together and discuss the sexualization of race, class, and gender as an experimental radical art form. This is a very bad idea. This is very harmful to students' education. This should not be permitted at any college or university in the country. This is extremely obscene. This appeals primarily to the prurient interest, and it is not protected by free speech. In the American tradition, this class would have no free speech protection, no First Amendment protection. Why? It's not because pornography is not a worthwhile phenomenon to discuss. It is. It's a huge problem in America. It's a major political problem. We don't really talk about it enough. It's destroying the lives of especially a lot of young men. How many times every week I get letters into my mailbag, lots of letters into my mailbag saying, I've been hooked on porn since I was 10. It's ruined my life. How do we fix it? So I think the conversation is really important to have. I think it's really important to study how pornography was mainstreamed into America, how legal prohibitions against it were overturned. That's a really interesting conversation. But that's not what this class does. This class involves sitting down with boys and girls and the teacher watching this stuff. Well, that's very different. It'd be like taking a class on crystal meth and cocaine and hardcore narcotics. You could take a class on that in chemistry, for instance, and talk about these drugs and what they do and their effects, and you could even have a policy discussion on whether or not they should be legal or regulated. That class would be perfectly fine. But the minute that the class says, okay, and as part of your final exam, you're all going to do a bunch of crystal and tell me how it feels. You're all going to blow a bunch of lines of coke, smoke a pipe of crack, and tell me how it feels. That's a very different thing. And that's what this porn class is doing. Because the way that you use crack cocaine is by smoking it. The way that you use heroin is by injecting it. The way that you use pornography is by watching it. The very act of watching pornography is what destroys that sort of academic environment. Because when you watch porn, it's the same reason that you shouldn't be doing these kind of hardcore drugs. When you watch pornography, you are not appealing to your rational faculties. You're not appealing to your intellect. You're not appealing to your rational will. You're losing control of that because you're appealing to the appetite. If you watch a lot of porn, if you do a lot of drugs, if you drink too much, if you do things that are in the indulgence of your vices, you are going to lose your higher will. You're going to weaken your rational faculties. And that's not a very good thing. Unfortunately, that's what our society has become. I know that we always talk about 1984 by George Orwell as though that were the description of the society we're living in. There's censorship. There's an increasingly totalitarian form of government. Yeah, sure. Actually, the way that the establishment controls the American people is much more like Brave New World by Aldous Huxley than 1984 by George Orwell. Huxley, who was Orwell's French teacher, I believe, actually wrote a letter to him to this effect and said, you know, George, it's a good book that you wrote, but my version of it is more accurate as to how political elites actually gain power. They don't do it by just smacking you with a stick. They don't do it by beating you into submission. They usually do it by appealing to your desires, by appealing to your appetites and your lusts. They do it by promoting drugs, by promoting promiscuous sex, by destroying the family. By which is more, when you look at those two visions of a dystopian society, which seems more correct? The absolute, rigid, transparent party program that has all of these very strict rules that you've got to follow, or a society of licentiousness and hedonism that tells you if it feels good, do it? Obviously, it's the latter. That's the way the society is decaying, and that's not only is that a function of the really decayed aspects of popular culture, that's now what's literally being taught in universities, the purpose of which is to do the opposite. The purpose of which is to give you a liberal education and teach you how to make sense of your freedom. I'm so glad you liked that clip. Now, ring the bell, subscribe, get all the notifications, head on over also to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher, Google Play, and type in The Michael Knowles Show. Subscribe, leave a 5-star review. We'll see you next time.